Let's talk about 3 of the main reasons I see golfers early extend on the lesson tee on a daily basis. Before we talk about why, let's talk about what. What is early extension? Well, what you need to understand is we got to look at the word here. Extension does happen, but in this case, it's happening early. So what is extension? Well, my spine can be neutral, I can be flexed, or I can be extended. And so when we look at really good players, especially in the follow-through, they do have some amount of extension. We don't see a lot of high-level players like this in the follow-through. But what's happening here is that move is essentially happening too early. And so what's the reason for this? Why do players tend to do this? In my experience, reason number 1 is going to be the player has the club face angle way too open in the late stages of the downswing. So what they do, instead of just returning the club where it should be and pointing the club face way off to the right, they've learned that that doesn't work. And so what they do instead is they use early extension, or they thrust the pelvis in and they start lifting the chest up and out of the shot as a way to slow the rate the body rotates through the golf ball. By doing that, they can avoid adding a bunch of shaft lean, which rotation would tend to do, and leaving the club face open. Instead, they can thrust their pelvis in, back their chest up and out of the shot, and give some time for that club face to catch up, give some time for that shaft to release a little bit early, end up with less shaft lean, but eventually get that club face looking more at the target. It may not be the most efficient, but it is a way to start squaring the club face. So if that's you and you want to get rid of your early extension, my number 1 recommendation would be check out that club face on the way down. If it's pointed back up and behind you with the toe, you need to first work on getting that face angle in a slightly stronger position so that you can now have the ability, you can be afforded the opportunity to stay in posture, not slow down the rate you rotate, but continue rotating through the golf ball and deliver some shaft lean without the face obviously being pointed way off to the right, because we took care of it back here, okay? Number 2 is going to be a steep shaft in the downswing. And steep and shallow get thrown out a lot. What I mean when I say steep is the club head itself is not far enough behind the player. It's actually way out in front of the player, maybe excessively. And this would lead to a very outside in club path in most cases. So what a player will do, if I took this stick and I used it to represent my spine here, and I just kind of kept the relationship between my spine and the club head the same, again, what I will see a player do is they will start this early extension move where the pelvis moves in, the chest starts to move out. And what this does is it actually starts to move the club head itself more behind the player. And so we're taking a swing or a club that's designed to swing outside in. And by doing this early extension move, we're actually able to get that golf club to move a little bit more behind me, that club head, and it starts to maybe swing a little bit more from the inside. That's a way to start shallowing out the golf swing. So early extension is actually a shallower in most cases, and people use it because the shaft is too steep in the downswing. So my recommendation would be don't worry about the early extension at first. First, get that golf club to work a little bit shallower in the downswing, and there's a multitude of drills you can do to do that, but a simple one I like is to take an alignment stick. I'll lay it over the screen thing right here. Put it on your right heel, your trail heel, and in the backswing, in the backswing, try to keep the club head in front or on this side of the stick, and in the downswing, try to keep the club head on that side of the stick. That's a very simple kind of external cue to help people who tend to steepen the club. Again, you're just trying to push that club head back here into that side of the stick and keep it there as long as you can. Once you can shallow out the swing or the shaft on the way down, get the club head far enough behind you, then you can think about starting to maybe address some of your early extension if it doesn't fix it itself. Now, reason number 3, in my opinion, is a little simpler than reasons number 1 and 2. It's simply that the player will set up with their pelvis too far behind them at setup. And so we can tilt our pelvis forward and we can tilt it backwards. Typically, when I see players early extend, they will typically set up with their pelvis tilted forward too much. So if you were to imagine, if I set up to a golf ball here and I tilted my pelvis as far forward as I could, now all of a sudden when I swing, it's not going to tilt, it's not going to push back more because I've already maxed out how much I can push my pelvis back. Instead, what it's going to do is it's going to want to push in towards the golf ball. So when I see players early extending, a lot of times I'll see their butt is stuck out too far and they've tilted that pelvis down a lot. So the fix for this is really, my favorite analogy is to imagine your pelvis is a bucket of water. We don't want to drip water out of the front. We actually want to level it out a little bit and suck that butt a little bit more under us. Now as we swing, we actually have room to move that pelvis back a little bit and avoid early extension. So